The Last Word with Ali Velshi, who will be with me in Philadelphia. It's time for that right now.
I'm very excited about that. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro will be there. Sherilyn Ifill will be there. But more importantly, we're going to be there with a whole lot of our friends who watch us every night. And I'm really excited about that. You know, you're one of my favorite people. And Tuesday night, we're going to be spending a lot of time together.
You too. Yes.
But you know what my biggest beef with you is, right? My complaint. It's the same complaint I have every time. But, you know, I can't concentrate on my show because I'm watching your show before this show.
That is very kind, Ali.
But today I was fine. I actually didn't. I was done 10 seconds into your show because you said it's a bad day for slush funds. And that's all I needed to hear. Like that, to me, is like, you know what? That's it. That's the headline I need to hear. We're done.
It's true. Well, my beef with you is that you have 12 jobs and you do it with such brilliance and intelligence. I'm like, how does he do it? But here
and once in a while we come together and Tuesday night we got those big primaries, so we're going to be on TV together a lot on Tuesday. Have yourself a great night and a great weekend, my friend.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ali. Have a great weekend.
You too. Well, breaking news today. 2 federal judges stepped in to stop what Democrats and Republicans have called Donald Trump's slush fund. Earlier today, a federal judge temporarily blocked the fund after a lawsuit filed by a former January 6th federal prosecutor and others. And tonight, a huge development. The federal judge in Miami, who was actually overseeing Donald Trump's lawsuit against the IRS, which ultimately, in theory, led to the slush fund, is now investigating whether Donald Trump abused the court system with his $1.776 billion settlement, and I use that word in quotes, of that lawsuit, since Donald Trump has authority over the IRS as president. The U.S. District Judge, Kathleen Williams, has ordered Donald Trump's attorneys to respond by June 12th to, quote, 1, the charges of collusion and whether the parties, Trump and the IRS, are truly adverse. And number 2, the assertion that the dismissal in this case was premised on deception by the parties. And number 3, the question of whether the case should be reopened because the court was the, quote, victim of a fraud, end quote. Because the court was a, quote, victim of a fraud. I get it. We're numb to this stuff. But think about this for a second. A federal court alleging that it could be the victim of a fraud by the sitting American president with alleged collusion between the Treasury, the bank where America keeps your money, and the Justice Department, now led by Donald Trump's former criminal defense attorney and working wholesale for Donald Trump. This whole thing has got some end-stage regime vibes to it. Today, Donald Trump's former Attorney General, Pam Bondi, appeared before the House Oversight Committee in its Epstein investigation. Her testimony was originally scheduled to be on camera and under oath. But after Donald Trump fired Pam Bondi, House Republicans changed the terms. Pam Bondi appeared today not under oath, not on camera, not in public view. Our first guest tonight, Congressman Robert Garcia, the top Democrat on the Oversight Committee, emerged from the closed-door hearings and said this.
I also personally asked the former AG 5 times and 5 different questions about her conversations with President Trump, whether he directed her at any given time on the Epstein files, what he knew, what he asked her to redact or not, and she refused to answer any questions about President Trump. In fact, she said that she would not speak or respond to any questions that had anything to do with President Trump.
Worth noting, by the way, that she, too, was Donald Trump's personal attorney. Congressman Garcia made it clear that what happened today was Pam Bondi's attempt to avoid accountability. She blamed the now acting Attorney General and also Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, for the handling of the Epstein files. Quote, I delegated oversight over this process to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, end quote. House Democrats say they're going to continue to seek the truth.
Justice doesn't have a time limit. And no matter how much Comer or Bondi or Blanche or Trump or whoever else fights back against the truth coming out, that this fight will continue, that we will not relent.
In other words, This is a preview of what's to come if America does the right thing in November, and current polling says they will, and votes for some checks on this administration. This is what the future will be. This is the beginning of what it looks like for the people who have helped Donald Trump's criminalization of the government. The Trump Republicans, who have spent several years operating with impunity, could soon find themselves facing real oversight if Democrats win the gavel. Subpoenas, public hearings, sworn testimony under oath, recorded proceedings, real investigations, not protection, but accountability. That distinction really matters. One of the defining features of this Trump era has been the normalization of conduct that in any previous administration would have triggered immediate scandal, investigation, and probably resignation. Instead, what we have seen is a one-party ecosystem that insulates powerful people from scrutiny, and Republicans controlling Congress have effectively created a safe space for a former Trump official facing serious questions. Congressman Robert Garcia could be the chairman of the Oversight Committee after the midterms, and use the power of the gavel to enforce subpoenas and hold Trump allies accountable. And this is not about one Trump official or one Trump policy. It's about whether the United States government is still constrained by law, whether Congress still controls spending as the Constitution demands, whether presidents are still accountable. M. Gesson writes in the New York Times about the lessons America can learn from the stunning defeat of the Trump hero, the autocrat Viktor Orban in Hungary. Quote, previous opposition politicians had described Orban's regime as corrupt, a relatively mild term suggesting some aberration from the government's intended function. Peter Magyar made no such accommodation. He has called it a mafia state, a fundamentally criminal enterprise. The lesson? Don't mince words, end quote. Don't mince words about a mafia state, a fundamentally criminal enterprise. And we're talking about Democratic senators like Sheldon Whitehouse already warning Trump administration officials to preserve any documents about this Donald Trump 1776 slush fund. Accountability is coming for the slush fund, for the pardons for January 6th rioters who assaulted police officers, and for other criminals, for using the Department of Justice and government power to shield allies and punish and menace Trump critics, even private citizens like E. Jean Carroll, for Trump taking a bulldozer to the historic White House that does not belong to him. Speaking of end-stage regime vibes, all the posters of Trump's face currently hanging off of government buildings, the tacky gold stick-ons, all the Trump graffiti on the Capitol, those will all be gone too. Starting tonight with the Kennedy Center. Just the Kennedy Center. Today, a federal judge gave Donald Trump 14 days to take his name off of Washington's Marquis Arts Center. The judge's message was simple. Congress named it for President Kennedy, and only Congress can rename it. The Kennedy Center belongs to the American people, not to Donald Trump. And come November, we may be in for a reminder that the American government also belongs to the American people. Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia of California. He serves as the ranking member of the Oversight Committee. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Sure thing.
You know, ostensibly, we were going to talk to you, and I will, about Pam Bondi's testimony and the continuation of the Epstein investigation, which you are so central to. But today feels different. It feels like a lot of things have happened. While Pam Bondi sort of escaped some degree of accountability, what you and your colleagues said is that she will not in the end. And if voters do what we expect them to do in November, none of them will be able, none of these enablers will escape accountability. They will have to testify under oath.
That's exactly right. I mean, look, today was actually a monumental day for justice and for setting things right. I mean, obviously you have these judges coming out so strongly, pushing back on the Kennedy Center, just the desecration of what Trump tried to do there, pushing back on this slush fund to enrich himself, January 6ers and election deniers, stealing from the taxpayer so that he could essentially enrich his friends and his buddies and his family even more. And of course, with the Epstein investigation. We had Pam Bondi come before us. We asked tough questions. It was clear once again that she is part of this broader White House cover-up. I asked her 5 times about Donald Trump, multiple questions. She refused to answer, but she did very clearly point all arrows towards Todd Blanche. And so I think it's really important at this moment for us to understand that Todd Blanche is a key target for us to investigate, to ask questions, and he must be in front of our committee.
So everything about the story is unbelievable, right? If you wrote this story and submitted it for a movie or a TV show, they'd laugh you out. Todd Blanche, Pam Bondi have both represented Donald Trump. The obligation to represent a client never, ever ends. And to my surprise, Todd Blanche is acting more like that guy than less. He didn't seem to take the lesson of Pam Bondi being removed from office. So on one hand, he's defense of Donald Trump as he gets stronger. On the other hand, Pam Bondi seemed to throw him under the bus today.
That's exactly right. I mean, there's a couple of things that are just really incredible here that's going on right now. I mean, one, you have Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former personal lawyer. I would argue he continues to be his personal lawyer, yes, acting as the attorney general. He's out there managing the Epstein investigation. He's out there clearly covering up for the president, doing God knows what, giving Ghislaine Maxwell special treatment, putting her in a less secure prison. And this entire time, Pam Bondi, of course, is at the top of the DOJ. And according to her, she had no knowledge of the transfer. We should ask Todd Blanche. She had no knowledge of the redaction process of the Epstein files. We should ask Todd Blanche.
You didn't just fall off the turnip truck, right? How is that possible? How is that possible that one of the most notorious sex offenders in the country got moved and somehow that didn't make it from the deputy attorney general to the attorney general?
Well, not only was it insane in the way she answered these questions, but I actually asked her about the Ghislaine Maxwell transfer. And she, on the record, which I'm looking forward to the transcript being released by Republicans, on the record, she basically said that she felt the transfer, that there wasn't actually a difference from one prison to the other, that it was comparable. And I reminded her that the Bureau of Prisons has 4 levels of prisons and facilities, and she was actually downgraded to the lowest level, and that is BOP, the prison system guideline. She was downgraded. Right. She had no idea. She didn't know about the transfer. She wouldn't admit to it, and she again pointed at Todd Blanche. And so it is crazy that even during today, by the way, she has a DOJ attorney sitting next to her, a very high-ranking DOJ attorney. It's basically telling her when to answer, when not to answer, whispering in her ear, saying, don't talk about Donald Trump, saying we're not going to answer that question. And so what's it going to be? I mean, Pam Bondi wants to point the finger at Todd Blanche, or she can actually take some responsibility and actually tell us the truth. And had Comer decided to put her under oath and videotaped it, we would have gotten a lot further with the questions.
Well, maybe we'll get that chance after November's election and January's new Congress. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. Congressman Robert Garcia is a ranking member of the Oversight Committee. All right, coming up, a Nebraska Republican got an earful from angry voters this week, venting about rising costs, Trump's war in Iran, and that $1.8 billion slush fund. The Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan has been doing town halls in battleground Wisconsin, and he's going to tell us what he's hearing from voters next. On the 90th day of Donald Trump's war with Iran, as Americans continue to see high gas prices at the gas pump and inflation rising at the fastest pace in 3 years, voters are getting fed up with the Trump administration. Just ask Republican Congressman Mike Flood, who faced questions like this at a town hall this week in his Trump-friendly Nebraska congressional district.
Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general, settled that case for $1.776 billion with an anti-weaponization fund. Last year you talked about fiscal conservatism. How is that fiscally conservative?
Next question. Where does Nebraska stand in a Trump world when farmers have been hurt under both terms of the Trump administration? Taxpayers have got to pay for their mistakes. Congressman Flood, President Trump wants to kill 89 million Iranians because they were born on the wrong side of the world. Is that a Christian approach? Slush fund for crooks. How do we pay for all this? Okay, we return to questions from the cards. Here's another one as I take them in order to your thoughts on the anti-weaponization slush fund. We've already had that one. The next three questions here are all the same. It's what do you think about the new slush fund?
Man, he looks uncomfortable there. Our next guest, the Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan, has been on a town hall tour in his district in battleground Wisconsin this week, and his constituents have exactly the same concerns, sounding off on the Trump slush fund, rising prices, and this war with Iran, which is in its 90th day, and nobody can really explain why it's happening. Joining us now is the Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan of Wisconsin. He's a member of the House Appropriations Committee. Congressman, thank you for being with us. I have to say, I want to talk to you about a lot of these issues, but you are introducing a bill called the Tax the Grift Act, in which you are going to be taxing the payouts from the $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund at 100%. So anybody who gets a payout from that thing faces a 100% tax and has to give it all back to you and me, us, the taxpayers.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I'm hoping that we can just outright kill. But if they start to give out monies, and I saw My Pillow guy, I think, is trying to get $300 or $400 million out of that fund alone. At least we can tax it at 100% and make sure that no money actually goes to this rogues gallery of people that are coming out from under rocks to try to get access to this fund. I'll tell you, this is one of the biggest things that came up at the town hall, is just the general corruption of the Trump administration and this fund in particular.
Yeah, I mean, they've really given slush funds a bad name. There have been some legal developments today, which means that might not happen in both cases. Two separate federal decisions. One is that the slush fund is on hold, and the second one is that whole court case, that whole lawsuit that led to it, Donald Trump suing the IRS, it seems weird, and the court says that it might have been a victim of fraud and collusion by the U.S. government, by the president. What kind of world are we in?
Yeah, it's probably not fair to the word weird. I mean, this is corruption. Right? This is Donald Trump trying to originally sue for $10 billion on something that everyone said would never go anywhere. And then he settles essentially with himself, his Department of Justice, for this almost $1.8 billion slush fund. And by the way, you can never prosecute him or his family, past, present, or future, on tax returns. I mean, people just look at this and roll their eyes. Between the fact they're paying too much for groceries and everyday goods, they're paying too much for health care. That one really stood out, and utilities, and now out of pocket for gas every single time they're at the pump. They're just kind of had it. And it was interesting, Allie. It was my more rural counties that had more people turn out than my urban counties. One county
that makes
I have
sense.
doesn't even have a stop and go light in the entire county. The growing population is Amish. And people really came out to voice their
But they are
concern about
hurting.
Donald Trump.
People in rural America are hurting. Their health care is hurting. People forget that if you're not an industrial farm, if you're a small family farm, you depend on health care assistance. Your cost of fertilizer has gone up. You've got a trade deal going on where other people are imposing tariffs on your stuff. It's always hard to be a farmer. It's never not been hard to be a farmer. It's really hard to be a farmer if you're not a large-scale industrial corporate farm today.
Well, and diesel fuel also is doubled.
And diesel, yes.
Even more than what we're paying for gas, and farmers use a lot of that. So, they're really feeling that squeeze. And then you're exactly right on healthcare. And, after the November election is when the Medicaid cuts come in. But I know a lot of farmers who are on Medicaid because they're not making enough as farmers. So, that squeeze just continues and continues. And, we literally, I think it was in Iowa County, there weren't enough chairs in the building for them to all be able to sit down because people really wanted to come and be heard.
Well, I hope they understand that there's still a very important mechanism and a way to be heard in America, and that will come on November 3rd. Congressman, good to see you as always. The Wisconsin Congressman Mark Pocan is a member of the Appropriations Committee. All right, coming up, Trump and Republicans are resorting to gerrymandering and voter suppression to try to win the midterms, but messing with elections will only get them so far when voters have actually had enough. Plus, there's a new issue that could scramble political lines in November, dubbed by the New York Times as, quote, the most bipartisan issue since beer. That's next. Ahead of the November midterm elections, a new issue is beginning to reshape local politics across the country: data centers. These are massive facilities that power artificial intelligence. But the debate over data centers isn't actually about the technology, which, by the way, is an important debate we should be having about AI. It's about the resources that they use. These data centers are being proposed largely in rural areas where land is abundant, and local officials often see them as an opportunity for economic development, for jobs, and for revenue. And some of that's true. But data centers use a massive amount of energy. They use a massive amount of water for cooling at a time when many places in this country are actually facing water shortages, and they demand an enormous amount of electricity. The costs of upgrading our electrical infrastructure to supply them are often passed on to consumers. In much of this country, as we have learned in recent years, both our electrical and water infrastructure is substandard. But in a lot of places, you're seeing electricity prices rise for consumers. Data centers also often bring noise and heavy construction and major changes to communities that have long been relatively quiet. But recent polling shows that 7 in 10 Americans oppose AI data centers being built in their neighborhoods. And as you can see, a majority of voters from both parties are expressing the same concern over data centers. The New York Times called it the most bipartisan issue since beer. MS Now's Josh Einiger went to Texas to talk to voters.
But the question is, are data centers going to flip the Senate seat?
Absolutely, yes, 100%.
You're willing at this point to forego basically every conservative issue and let the Senate fall into the hands of Democrats if that's what it takes to kill data centers?
Yep. My entire community is going to break rank.
That's fascinating. It's part of a larger story that you've done on this.
Right.
This isn't actually a debate about AI at the moment.
It is not.
There is an important debate to be had about AI, what it is, and the regulation that should surround it, and you're on top of that too. This is a different story.
This is the regulation of how they create the AI,
Yes,
right? Of
right.
where they keep the computers.
Yes.
Which need all the stuff you talked about in the open there. It needs the cooling because it's millions of computers in warehouses, right? And they get hot. So they need the water to cool it. They need the power to cool it. And it, by the way, all creates all this noise because of the cooling systems are very loud, right? The issue is, how is it regulated? And in the state of Texas, we were in this ruby red part of a red state in central Texas, the hill country of Texas. People are very, very upset with their local, state, and federally elected Republican officials who they've been supporting for, they think, hanging them out to dry. And
right, and there's very little in the way of federal regulation, almost zero. It's ironic because we have an AI czar who's not doing that much czarring.
Right.
There are states that are trying to take action, or at least there are people who are running for office who say, if I'm elected to office, we will do something about this, particularly to protect people's electricity prices.
So this is a new development, right? It was last year the president signed an executive order clearing away a lot of those regulations to make it easier for this to happen. In Texas, the same thing happened at the state level. So now they have almost 500 facilities. And now they're realizing, oh, we need to hold these tech companies, big tech's feet to the fire to have them pay for their own electricity because now we've alienated all these voters. So now there's a pledge that 7 CEOs signed at the White House with the president that they're going to pay for their own electricity. But there are, as I said, almost 500 facilities that are already out there, and they're just siphoning off.
And some interesting deals coming out. Like one of them is building either a nuclear plant or an electrical plant. Like this idea that, but it requires that kind of energy. You kind of need a lot of energy produced so that you and I are not paying extra money for electricity.
We saw 2 massive facilities. I mean, I can't even describe how big they were. It's impossible to see the whole thing from any one place, right? And they were in process, they were in development. And a significant part of both of them was the power plant. One of them was a natural gas power plant. The other one was just endless array of solar panels. So this is the new paradigm, and they're trying to do this, but as they say in Texas, the horse is out of the barn when it comes to people being really upset about this. And you saw the reaction from those people that I talked to the other day in Texas. You know, they're really, really upset. And they're dyed-in-the-wool conservative voters. And you heard that one woman, if they're going to vote, that woman's going to vote for Tallarico, the Democrat, in this Senate race. If Texas flips that seat blue, which would be quite something, it would be the first time since 1993, that potentially portends the Senate turning blue. And the woman I talked to there that you saw is willing to do that.
Wow. Over AI.
Over AI.
It literally is the it is the most bipartisan issue since here. I wouldn't have thought so.
No.
I hope it leads to a real conversation, both about the stuff it takes to build AI and AI itself.
Right. But it gets to the all politics is local.
Yes.
And it gets to this sense that people want transparency in their government.
Yes.
Right. They want to know what's going on. And they all feel blindsided by this. When they get wind of a county commission meeting that they're going to have talk about one of these facilities being approved for tax incentives, abatements, whatever they go, and it's already basically been done.
It's done.
Right?
They want to be part of the process. Right. Josh, thanks for reporting on this. I appreciate it. We're going to go deeper into it on my weekend show as well. We have breaking news right now from Delaney Hall in Newark, New Jersey. This is an ICE detention center where detainees have been on hunger strikes and protests. The situation right now is very intense. I want to go to our reporter, Laura Hafley. Laura, you have, I can tell it from the fact that you're coughing right now. It's either pepper spray or tear gas has been deployed around you.
Yeah, it's hard to tell which one is which sometimes, but everything happened really quickly. So throughout the day, there were protesters outside of Delaney Hall in Newark, the ICE facility. They've been here for a week. As the evening hours went on, the protest crowd grew, and so did the crowd of state police officers. And then eventually we saw what were lines of state police officers holding shields. They had helmets on. They were carrying zip ties, and they sort of formed a bit of a wall, and they began walking down Doremus Avenue, which runs in front of the facility. And they were doing this as a typical tactic that these departments use to disperse protesters who refuse to leave. And they started walking, and they were actually something I haven't seen on horseback as well. So you had people holding shields, you had people on horseback, and out here in the field, safety is our priority. As soon as they started walking and we realized things were getting a little more intense, we started to back up as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And it escalated like that. All of a sudden, they were shooting what sounded like less than lethal ammunition. It's hard to tell exactly what it was. They were shooting towards protesters and therefore towards us. They were shooting into the sky. And then all of a sudden, we were surrounded by what is either tear gas or pepper spray.
Yeah.
And that is when, thankfully, our security guard got us out of there, myself and my photojournalist, very quickly and into our vehicle. Look, I've covered protests before. I've done it for years. This is up there with the most intense moment of protesting I've ever covered.
Wow.
It happened quick.
And by the way, it could be pepper spray, it could be tear gas, it could be both. The one thing that might help is milk, but it is this what you described, the police on horseback. It's something that was developed after protesting. There was some sense that they could move forward slowly. The horses react differently. People, generally speaking, move back. Was there a lot of interaction between the police and the protesters before the weaponry started being fired?
Yeah, I think it's important to give you a little bit of context here. So protesters throughout the afternoon were blocking the driveway, or what's being used as a driveway, into the facility. So Governor Sherrill actually held a press conference and said that she was going to create designated areas for protesters to stand in order to keep protesters and law enforcement safe. That is what set protesters off, and what essentially they were upset about. They did not want to go into those designated areas. But police, to your question here, police had told them several times that if they didn't do that, or if they didn't leave the area, that this is what was going to happen. And we've heard it a million times. The announcement that comes up over the vehicle's loudspeakers saying, if you don't comply with demands to leave, there will be some sort of consequence. Police did issue several of those warnings to these demonstrators, to these protesters. They did not comply, and that's when everything sort of took off here.
Is there? You're saying this is state police, not local police, and not ICE?
Correct. So New Jersey state troopers were conducting what just happened here. So the facility itself in Newark is going to have ICE agents, DHS, but they're going to stay on property typically. The county road that we're on is going to be, the jurisdiction is going to belong to the New Jersey state trooper. So that is who is here. The Newark Police Department is not here. So yeah, New Jersey state troopers were primarily involved in this. And again, people with shields, people on horseback, the horses getting incredibly close to the protesters. To your point, I've actually, living in New York City, you see mounted officers often. I've never seen horses actually get that close to protesters and frankly, physically move them out of the way.
Wow.
So it was pretty startling. It was pretty startling.
What has happened now? Has it been dispersed? Are there still protesters there? And is there some expectation that this has been going on for a few days, that this continues tomorrow?
People will absolutely be here tomorrow. Protesters have left the direct area, so the area out front of the facility is empty. We drove away because we were surrounded by tear gas and needed to be able to get out of the car at some point. But I do have a line of sight to the facility, and the street is completely empty except for the barricades that are on the ground and the trash. And you can still see a little bit of that sort of tear gas smoke in the air. Yeah.
There's been a lot of back and forth about what's supposed to happen at Delaney Hall. We've seen members of Congress showing up. I mean, they have, just to be clear, they have a right to inspect federal detention facilities without anything else, but they've been stopped from doing so. So Adriano Espaillat from New York and others have shown up with court orders. So in other words, they're getting a court order first, then they're showing up, showing it to the people there and saying, I have a right to get in there. What's at dispute right now? What is the reason these protesters are there? Is it simply the ICE policy? Is it the specific detention conditions in Delaney Hall? What is it they want to happen?
So there's a couple different things happening. Protesters during the day are here in solidarity. They're here to support family members who might be in the area. They're providing food and water to anyone who might be coming out of the facility. At night, the protesters become a little more agitated, and their focus really is on the conditions inside. We're being told by family advocates, demonstrators who have been here for quite some time, that there's an active hunger strike happening inside. And that is because these detainees feel like they're not living in proper conditions. They're not getting fed properly. They're not being treated properly, which has led to this hunger strike, which DHS denies. Again, advocates telling us that it is happening. So that's primarily why people are upset. They just feel like people inside are being treated inhumanely, and that, to your point, there's not a lot of transparency. Elected officials aren't even able to get answers, never mind family members, and certainly not these protesters. And there's one other thing that's happened. Visiting hours have been canceled completely. We're being told that now lawyers can't get in, family members can't get in. I'm being told that only primarily federal officials are being allowed in. And in part, DHS is blaming the protesters outside, saying they're making it unsafe for people to visit the facility. That is what I'm being told here on the ground. So that's another development that's happened.
Laura, please stay safe and keep your team safe. We need this kind of reporting. We need to be up close and personal and bearing witness to things people can't see. But tear gas, pepper spray, and not less than lethal weapons, by the way, are sometimes lethal, but they're very dangerous. So please stay safe.
And
Laura
if I can add one thing really quickly, I just want to say we have a great team out here. We have a well-trained photojournalist. We have a great security team, and that's the only reason we were able to get back to this car safely. Right. And it's so important that we were able to get that training. And you know what it's like. It's, that knowledge and that information is so crucial in these moments. So I just wanted to shout them out.
I appreciate that. Thank you to all of them and the journalists who are making sure that we can actually see what's going on, because the authorities in many cases would prefer that we don't. Laura Hafley for us at Delaney Hall in New Jersey. We'll be right back. The biggest war story in the world today didn't happen in Iran or in the White House, where once again Trump had reporters following the bouncing ball to a day that ended like all the previous 90 days of Trump's war with Iran, with no resolution. The Strait of Hormuz still closed and gas prices still absurdly high. The biggest war story today happened in Romania, which shares a border with Ukraine in the north and toward the Black Sea. Today, Romanian authorities say a Russian drone hit an apartment building in the city of Galati near the Black Sea, injuring 2 people. The New York Times reports it was the first known time that a Russian drone has caused damage and injuries in a major urban area on the territory of the Western Military Alliance, NATO. You can see the NATO countries in Eastern Europe in blue on this map. Russia is in yellow. NATO today condemned Russia's recklessness. It comes a day after the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that he had taken the extraordinary step of writing to the American president and the United States Congress to beg for more air defense. And the Russian foreign minister warned that Secretary of State Marco Rubio that Americans and diplomatic staff should evacuate from Kyiv. The U.S. Embassy in Kyiv says the embassy remains open. And as always, a reminder for anyone at home who's watching Russia's war on Ukraine, which is now in its 5th year, and now watching Donald Trump's war in Iran enter its 4th month, paying attention to Trump's words is a fool's errand.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled quickly. If I was president, there would not have been a war with Russia in Ukraine. 0 chance. I'll have that done in 24 hours. I'll have it done. You need the power of the presidency to do it.
All right, joining me now is the former ambassador of Russia, Michael McFaul. He's the author of Autocrats versus Democrats, China, Russia, America, and the New Global Disorder. Ambassador, good evening. Good to see you. Thank you for being with us. We have a lot to cover here, but I do want to start with this attack in Romania. It is not the first attack on a NATO country or a place where a Russian munition has landed in a NATO country. It is an urban area. And it is very clearly a NATO country. It doesn't feel like an accident. A couple times there's some that landed in Poland, and it felt like maybe they just overshot. What does this mean?
I hope it's a wake-up call for President Trump and his administration about how dangerous this war in Europe is in its 5th year. It's shocking to say that to you because we've been talking about it for that long. People think that somehow this war over there doesn't matter to us. We have given up now on supporting the Ukrainians. I just think that is an atrocious mistake. And I think it's a mistake for 2 reasons. One, I just think it's immoral. We should be on the side of the Democrats against the autocrats. We should be on the side of the Ukrainians fighting for their freedom, being terrorized now by these ballistic missiles on a near daily basis from Russia. But the second reason is in our own national security interests. As this war drags on, it has the potential to go to other countries, just as it did today. And what we do not want to do is get pulled into a direct war with Russia defending one of our NATO allies. So rather than to let it linger on, we should be providing more military assistance to Ukraine so that Ukrainians can stop the Russian military, the Russian army in their country, so that we don't have to fight them in Romania or Lithuania or some other NATO ally.
And those Baltic states are very, very concerned. They live in concern about this kind of thing happening. Article 5, which was invoked after 9/11, is the mutual defense part of NATO. But there's something called Article 4, and the Romanians have said that I believe they're thinking about, or they will invoke Article 4, which says the parties meaning NATO members, the parties will consult together whenever, in the opinion of any of them, the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened. Tell me what this means. I mean, somebody call a meeting and a bunch of NATO people get on a Zoom, or do they meet somewhere and say, how are we going to react to this?
They'll probably meet in NATO headquarters where all of our ambassadors are. That's what this does. And think of it as like a meeting before Article 5. It's to put it on the radar screen that we're taking it seriously. And the Romanians, as you just reported, have said they are deliberating about this. And I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea to remind all of the allies of the precarious nature of the balance of power and the balance of forces in Europe, and to do more to help our Ukrainian friends and partners fight the Russian army. And everybody else in NATO is doing that. I want to underscore that. I think a lot of Americans thought, well, we pulled out, so everybody else has pulled out. That's not true. President Zelensky was just in Sweden yesterday. The Swedes have just pledged to sell him and to give him some new airplanes. We're the one part of the NATO alliance that is not burden sharing. Remember, President Trump likes to talk about everybody needs to share the burden. Well, when it comes to the war in Ukraine, we're the ones that are absent now, not the rest of the alliance.
Hey, Ambassador, I got 30 seconds with you. I just want to ask you, what do you make of the Russians warning Marco Rubio to clear the Americans out of Kyiv?
They're losing the war on the battlefield right now. I think that is a real big moment. And so now they have to increase terrorism on Kyiv. That's what this is about. But I think they'll fail. They failed for 4.5 years to use terror to get the Ukrainians to quit. My prediction is they're going to fail again.
Ambassador, good to see you. As you said, I cannot believe we are discussing this in the fifth year. And by the way, that's the fifth year of the second part of the invasion that started many years before that. To the Russians, it's many more than that. Ambassador, good to see you. Former United States Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul. All right, coming up, a very personal last word from me is next. All right, a quick breaking news update. You saw that incredible reporting from our colleague Laura Hafley earlier in the show. Laura standing by to join the 11th hour with another report about the protests at Delaney Hall ICE Detention Center in Newark, New Jersey. That's coming up on the 11th hour. 250 years ago, the most ambitious experiment in participatory citizenship in human history began. Not perfectly, but it began with a promise that has been tested, broken, rebuilt, and tested again ever since. A soldier wrote a letter. A woman spoke up in a room full of men. A teenager held up a phone as a man's life was snuffed out by an agent of the state. Small acts of courage that changed everything. On June 25th, I'll join Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, the Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and Sherilyn Ifill at the Philadelphia Academy of Music to ask what we have done with that promise and what we still owe each other. Come, please, to remember what it feels like to be in a room full of people who show up. We the people. America 250. And a personal note before we go, I started my career at this network on a show called The 11th Hour. I've always wondered about that name because, strictly speaking, 11 p.m. is only the 11th hour if you started your day at noon. And who does that? But there's a deeper meaning to the phrase. In the ancient world, the day was counted as 12 hours of daylight, sunrise to sunset, and the 11th was the last hour of working light. The day was almost done, but there was still work to do. The show that's about to start in just a few seconds is the show I'm coming home to. Starting Monday, June 15th, I will host the 11th hour, weeknights at 11 p.m. Eastern. And I hope that you'll stay up just a little bit later and join me. That is tonight's last word.